Welcome back, guys. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Now, the South African hospitality sector is in the spotlight amid a 4-day inspection blitz by the Department of Labour as well as Employment. Now, the crisis was sparked by a social media post by a former waitress at the Swanky Babel Eatery in Pretoria and the alleged exploitation of workers by restaurant owners, including the employment of undocumented migrants and the non-compliance with health and safety standards, were some of the issues that were uncovered throughout this process. Now, we are going to be chatting to Wendy Alberts, who is the CEO of RASA, which is the Restaurant Association of South Africa, and she joins me now for her take on these events. Good evening, Wendy, and thank you so much for joining us here on INX Prime Live.
Thank you so very much for inviting us.
No, it's a pleasure having you. I just wanted to get straight into this conversation as well. Now, before we get into the fallout from the social media post, because I believe that Babel was one of the restaurants. There was many others like Tang. I would like to get your response to the 4-day blitz by the Department of Labour and Employment.
Look, it's very concerning that this is the level that we need to go to find out if compliance is actually in our industry. We've always been a respected industry. We're an industry that largely looks to be compliant. We are an industry that does certainly do our level best to ensure that we do best practices. And now that the blitzes are taking place, because we had a situation with a particular restaurant and the video went viral and so forth, it's clear on that particular audit with Babel that they were in contravention of the bylaws. And restaurants and businesses certainly do need to participate in the law, and they need to ensure that they execute compliance at every level. So what we've seen transgress over the next few days has become quite complicated, and it's good that we have these conversations. So we can see that there's been a lot of raids, there's a lot of trauma happening in restaurants, patrons are being upset. We could also see that staff are being traumatized, etc. So when we start having a conversation about unfair labour practices, is this not in conflict with what good labour practice should be? And what I really want to understand is, why can we not have a dignified meeting, that an appointment is made, that an inspector comes in uniform, that the paperwork is in order, that they are certain of their facts, that they're consistent with what the deliverables are, that they're accurate with the information that they're dispensing, and they compile the audit. So when we're now starting to have these behaviours that we're seeing happening in our industry, it becomes concerning, as our industry feels quite targeted at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're getting some comments and questions coming in from social media as well. I mean, Theo was just answering your question. In his opinion, you were saying that, in fact, it makes sense why they would come, at any moment in particular, because it gives the restaurant owners or the employers an opportunity to, cut corners, move things around, and kind of avoid what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that's a nice way of looking at it in terms of that. But like you did mention, there's other ways to look at it. I just want to go back to some of the big issues that were discovered by the department. Now, the biggest issue was around the basic minimum wage, right? Restaurant staff don't actually earn basic salaries and are paid purely on tips. Is there a bargaining council agreement on what should actually be happening?
Once again, I think the interpretation and, the way that social media video has gone viral, there's some things that definitely need to be cleared up. And I think the interpretation of the contractual agreements that staff enter into really need to be understood. And I think the Department of Labour, hand in hand with ourselves, really need to go through a large education process, because we talk about many aspects in one dialogue. And I think what we need to do is separate one. Are we talking foreign nationals that are documented to work in our industry? Are we talking illegal immigrants? Are we talking labour issues? Or are we talking bargaining council issues? And all four of these spaces have different jurisdictions. And I think it's really imperative that we try and understand the components of each one of these spaces. So to clear up the first part, which is the conversation around the minimum wage, there's very many different ways in our industry to pay a minimum wage. And as you well said, in these particular instances, we are governed by the Bargaining Council. And the Bargaining Council within the agreement allows us to be able to employ commission waiters. And this is where a lot of the conversation has been misled, because a lot of people are saying that they don't earn a minimum wage. but in the collective agreements, that the agreements in hand in a restaurant that is made by the collective staff and the majority of staff voted for allow for the staff to earn commission over and above their tips, or their tips over and above commission, whichever way you want to speak for good English. But when we say that they're not earning a minimum wage, it's not true, in fact. And then the payment of that commission is determined again by the collective agreement. So these are the conversations that we've needed to unpack and really need to put things into perspective and really need to bring fact and content to the table. And I think that there's been a lot of distortion, there's been a lot of sensationalism, a lot of noise, the reactions to the TikTok video. We need to have a relationship with the Department of Labor. Staff need to have a respected relationship with the Department of Labor, open lines of communication, that they have recourse, that they feel if they are a victim of unfair or discriminatory employment, that they can go to the CCMA or the Bargaining Council, the Department of Labor, and that there is a process that they can engage in that will support them. It's very concerning that a video of this nature has gone viral, and this is now the platform that is being reacted to by enforcement, when we should really be having good relationships. Going back to something that we were talking about just 5 minutes ago in terms of our businesses. We're an industry that has really been built on integrity. It costs millions and millions of rands to open up a restaurant. We're formal establishments. We have to comply. We need registrations. We need to be part of the Company Act. And having said all of this, we need to be an industry that is respected, and businesses need to be respected. And I think if we were having these relationships, we would not be finding ourselves in a situation. We're saying we're not against the audits and we're not against the raids, but it needs to be done in a dignified way where our staff are protected, our businesses are protected, our patrons are protected, and the economy is protected. But where they have come in and they've made arrests and they've arrested staff, and people have felt intimidated and violated, and there is certain degrees of conversation and communication about the Labour Act that has been maybe misunderstood or misinterpreted by representatives, we really need to start asking questions on how we can do things differently together to build adequate relationships, that we don't put restaurants in positions like this moving forward.
No, I agree with you completely, and I think it is a conversation that has to continue on, but I'm glad that you provided that clarity in terms of the tips versus a minimum wage. We definitely want to continue this conversation with you another day if, for example, we do see more of this happening over the next few days, which I believe we will actually see. But again, Wendy, thank you so much for clarifying that and also coming and sharing some time with us here on INX Prime Live.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. That is Wendy Alberts, who is the CEO of RASA, which is the Restaurant Association of South Africa, just sharing with us her views on what's currently happening when it comes to undocumented workers, but also understanding the whole differentiation between tips versus minimum wage. We are going to continue this conversation over the next few days as the government continues these raids on a lot of the restaurants. But for now, let's take a quick ad break. We'll come right back.